The Underdark is horrifying because it knows you before you enter it. I survived 37 days in that living darkness, where the stone itself hungers and watches. You think you know darkness? True darkness has eyes. You think tunnels are empty passages. In the Underdark, they breathe. My expedition entered with 17 souls. I alone returned, though something followed me to the surface. Something that waits in every shadow, in every wall, in every silent moment between heartbeats. What changes in a person when the darkness claims them? What grows in their place? I feel them watching me even now. They watch through the cracks in the stone, through the shadows that stretch too long, through the silence between my breaths. I have been down here for 37 days, though time means nothing in a place without sun or stars. Captain Dareth Sol, they called me above, leader of the Wayfinder expedition, cartographer to the merchant lords of Waterdeep. Now I am simply the last. The others are gone, not dead. I almost wish they were. The Underdark consumes in ways you cannot understand until you have felt its hunger press against your skin. We came to map its passages, to chart a forgotten trade route said to run beneath the Sword Mountains. 17 of us descended, strong men and women with bright torches and sharp swords, veterans of a dozen expeditions, skilled mages with spells of protection, warriors blessed by temple priests. We were prepared for monsters, we were ready for ambush, we were fools. I write these words by the light of my final torch. The flame gutters low, fighting against something more suffocating than mere darkness. When it dies, I will have nothing left but the faint blue glow of my sending stone, the stone that has remained silent despite my pleas. I record this account hoping someone will find it, hoping someone will understand, hoping someone will remember Dareth Sol as he was, not as what he will become when the darkness finally takes him. Our expedition began with such hope. The merchant lords of Waterdeep spoke of reopening ancient trade routes, of wealth flowing from the surface to the deep places and back again. They showed us maps recovered from dwarven ruins, spoke of forgotten highways beneath the mountains, where caravans once traveled freely between the kingdoms of sun and stone. 30 days, Lord Blackwell had promised, his rings glittering in the council chamber light. Chart the main passage, mark any dangers, and return. The first step in restoring a lost wonder of the world. 17 faces around that table, bright with anticipation. Wealth for some, adventure for others. For me, the promise of adding to the grand maps that hung in the Hall of Records, my name etched alongside the great explorers of the age. We entered through an old dwarven mine abandoned generations ago when its veins of silver ran dry. The entrance was a wound in the mountainside, black against the snow that covered the slopes. A cold wind blew from that darkness, carrying a scent I could not name. Something ancient and patient. "Smells like wealth to me," Joran said, our quartermaster adjusting the pack on his shoulders. A merchant's son with dreams of nobility, he had invested heavily in our venture. "Smells like death," muttered Selwyn, our botanist. She had come to study the fungi that grew in the deep places, searching for new medicines. Her words were spoken in jest, but no one laughed. The first days passed uneventfully. We followed the old mine tunnels deeper, marking our path with runes that glowed with a soft blue light. Tethrin, our dwarven cartographer, confirmed that the passages matched the ancient maps. Though long disuse had caused some collapse and blockage, we were forced to navigate around. On the 5th day, we reached what the maps called the Grand Descent, a vast vertical shaft that plunged into darkness. Ancient iron rings had been driven into the rock wall, forming a spiral staircase that wound downward as far as our lights could reach. "The true Underdark begins below," said Tethrin, running his fingers over dwarven runes carved beside the shaft entrance. "These warn of leaving the upper ways." "Do they warn of specific dangers?" asked Martin, our most experienced warrior. His hand rested on the hilt of a sword that had tasted the blood of a dozen Underdark denizens on previous expeditions. Tethrin was silent for a moment, studying the ancient script. No, he said finally. They simply say, here ends the known, here begins the deep song. Song? I asked, but Tethrin only shrugged. A poetic turn of phrase, perhaps. The dwarves of old often spoke of the voice of the stone, the rhythm of the hammer. Mining terms. We made camp beside the shaft, preparing for the descent the following day. As I lay in my bedroll, I heard it for the first time. A faint vibration in the stone beneath me, not quite a sound, but something felt in the bones and teeth. A rhythm that almost, but not quite, matched the beating of my heart. Sleep came with difficulty that night, and my dreams were troubled. I saw our company walking along a tunnel that breathed, walls expanding and contracting like lungs. I saw faces in the stone, watching with hungry eyes as we passed. I saw my companions one by one pressing their palms against the living rock, their skin adhering, their bodies gradually pulled into the wall until only their faces remained, expressions caught between terror and bliss. I woke gasping, my skin slick with sweat despite the chill of the deep. Around me my companions slept soundly, save for Valna, our scout, who sat watch by the dim embers of our fire. Her eyes caught mine across the cavern, reflecting the faint light like a cat's. "You hear it too," she said, not a question. I nodded, sitting up. "What is it?" She smiled, a strange expression in the dim light. The deep song, the stone speaking. I remembered Tethrin's translation of the dwarven warning. "What does it say?" Valna tilted her head, as if listening. "It says, 'Welcome home.'" I should have turned back then. I should have heeded the unease that crawled along my spine at her words. But morning came, and with it the rational light of our torches. Valna made no mention of our midnight conversation, and I convinced myself it had been part of my dream. We descended the spiral stair, a journey that took the better part of a day. The shaft seemed to go on forever, our lights unable to reach its bottom even as we circled downward. The air grew warmer, heavier with moisture, carrying strange scents of growth and decay. Finally, we reached the bottom, emerging into a vast cavern where phosphorescent fungi bathed everything in a ghostly blue glow. Massive stalactites hung from the ceiling high above, many as thick as castle towers. Some had merged with the stalagmites rising from the floor to form columns that seemed to support the weight of the world above. "This is not on the map," Tethrin said, consulting the ancient parchment with a frown. "There should be a straight tunnel here, leading east toward the mountain's heart." "Perhaps we took a wrong turn," suggested Kaeldra, our healer, a priestess of Ilmater who had joined our expedition to tend wounds and ward against the Underdark's many diseases. "There were no turns to take," I said, looking back at the single exit from the spiral stair. "This is where we should be, but the land itself is wrong. The first thing you learn about the Underdark is that it lies. The maps we brought showed tunnels running straight and true, caverns with solid boundaries, landmarks that should not move. Yet from our first day below, we found nothing where it should be. Tunnels that bent back on themselves, caverns that seemed to breathe, landmarks that shifted when no one was looking. The maps must be wrong," Tethrin said on our third day beneath the grand descent. "These passages make no sense." "No," I told him, checking my instruments again. "The maps are correct. It is the Underdark that is wrong." I did not understand what I meant by those words, not truly. Not then. I do now. We had chosen a passage that seemed to lead in the direction we needed, a tunnel large enough for us to walk three abreast, its walls smooth as if carved by tools rather than nature. The blue glow of the fungi had followed us, patches of it growing along the ceiling and in crevices, providing just enough light to navigate by. The tunnel turned and twisted, sometimes doubling back on itself in ways that should have been impossible given the distances involved. When I noted this to Tethrin, showing him my careful measurements, he merely shook his head. "I have heard tales," he said reluctantly, "among my people, of deep places where space itself is twisted, where distance and direction lose meaning. Old miners speak of tunnels that cannot be mapped because they exist in more than one place at once. That is superstition. argued Joran. "We simply need better measurements." But no amount of measuring could explain how we walked east for 3 hours, turned north for another 2, west for 4, south for 1, and found ourselves farther east than where we had begun. The Underdark defied not just our maps, but the fundamental laws of nature. It was after this discovery that I noticed the first changes in my companions. Subtle things. Valna began to disappear for hours during our rest periods, returning with no explanation of where she had gone. Laurel, one of our mages, started to whisper to herself in a language none of us recognized. Tethrin would press his ear to the stone walls, listening with an intensity that bordered on reverence. We made camp that night in a wide cavern with walls of smooth obsidian. The black glass reflected our torchlight, creating the illusion of a space twice as large, filled with mirror images of ourselves that moved when we moved, watched when we watched. I found myself avoiding looking at the reflections. There was something wrong about them, something I could not quite identify. It was Pella, our other mage, who finally gave voice to my unease. "Our reflections move wrong," he said quietly, standing beside me as I attempted to update our increasingly useless map. "Have you noticed? They move a heartbeat after we do, as if they were copying us, not reflecting." I looked up sharply, watching my own reflection in the obsidian wall. I raised my hand. The reflection raised its hand a moment later. I lowered my hand. The reflection followed, but not instantly as a true reflection should. "An illusion," I suggested. "Some trick of the Underdark meant to unnerve us." "Perhaps," Pella said, unconvinced. "Or perhaps something is watching us through the stone, trying to understand how we move, how we behave." I ordered no one to travel alone after that conversation, though I did not share Pella's theory with the others. Fear is contagious in the deep dark, and we had far enough to go. Valna, our scout, returned from her reconnaissance with strange news. "The tunnel we came through is gone," she said, her face unnaturally calm. "There is a wall of solid stone where it should be." We laughed at her, of course. 16 hardened explorers laughing at what could only be a jest, or a mistake. Tunnels do not simply disappear. I went to see for myself, walking back the way we had come only hours before. She was right. Where there should have been a passage tall enough for a horse and rider, there was now only unbroken stone. I pressed my hands against it, feeling its cold solidity. I knocked, listening to the dull thud that confirmed its thickness. "We must have taken a wrong turn," I said, though I knew we had not. "This cannot be the way we came." Valna said nothing, but her eyes held a knowledge that her words did not share. I should have recognized it then. The first sign of what was happening to us, to her. When we returned to camp, Tethrin was gone. We called his name, our voices echoing strangely in the obsidian chamber. The sound seemed to continue long after we fell silent, as if the darkness itself were mocking our calls. We searched for hours, forming pairs to check every corner of the cavern, every possible exit. There were none. Martin, our most experienced warrior, drew his sword. "Something took him," he said, eyes scanning the shadows. "Something is hunting us." But there was no blood. No signs of struggle. Tethrin had simply ceased to be among us. Like a stone dropped into a still pool, he had vanished without trace, leaving only ripples of unease. That night, Keldra attempted to commune with her god, seeking guidance or at least comfort. We gathered around as she knelt on the stone floor, holy symbol clutched in her hands. She began the ritual words, her voice steady and sure as she called upon Ilmater, god of endurance and suffering, to hear her. The words faltered. Her face, previously serene in devotion, twisted in confusion, then fear. "I cannot feel him," she whispered. "My God, he is not there." "The Underdark is deep," consoled Joran. "Perhaps the stone blocks your prayers." "No," Keldra said, voice rising. "You do not understand. He has never been silent before, not in the deepest dungeon, not in the heart of darkness. Even in the 9 hells, his voice would reach me, but here there is nothing, no presence. No warmth, only silence. She looked up at us, her eyes wide. No, not silence. Something else. Something that answers in his place. Something that wears his voice like a borrowed cloak. Martin stepped forward. "Blasphemy," he said firmly. "This place plays tricks on the mind. Your God has not abandoned you." "I did not say he abandoned me," Kaeldra replied, her voice strange. "I said something else answers when I call his name." We slept in shifts that night, 4 standing watch while the rest huddled close to the fire. I dreamed of walls that breathed, of stone that flowed like water, of darkness with teeth. I woke to find Laurel, one of our mages, standing motionless at the edge of the firelight. Her eyes were open but unseeing, fixed on something in the darkness beyond our camp. "Laurel?" I whispered, not wanting to wake the others. "What do you see?" When she turned to me, her face was calm. Serene, even. "They are singing, Captain. Can you not hear them? They sing such beautiful songs." I listened but heard nothing save the quiet breathing of my sleeping companions and the occasional pop from our fire. "Who sings?" I asked. "The stone," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "The darkness. They sing of belonging, of becoming. They sing of home." I led her back to her bedroll, telling myself she was merely overtired, her mind playing tricks after the stress of Tethrin's disappearance. When morning came, if there is such a thing as morning in the eternal night of the Underdark, both Laurel and Valna were gone, and there were new tunnels in the walls of our cavern, tunnels that writhed like worms when viewed from the corner of the eye, but stood perfectly still when observed directly. "We leave now," I ordered, my voice steadier than I felt. "We find a way back to the surface." No one argued. We gathered our supplies and chose a tunnel that seemed to angle upward. The passage was narrow, forcing us to walk single file. The walls were damp, coated with a film that felt less like moisture and more like sweat. The stone itself seemed feverish, radiating a heat that had nothing to do with the nearness of the planet's core. As we walked, I questioned Pellar about what might be happening to us, to our missing companions. As a mage specializing in divination, he had more knowledge of the strange and unnatural than most. "There are entities in the Underdark that can influence minds," he said quietly, walking close behind me. "Illithids that consume thoughts, aboleths that corrupt memories, demons that whisper madness. But we have seen none of these creatures," I countered. "No tentacled horrors, no ancient evils. Just stone and darkness. Perhaps that is all there is," he suggested. "Perhaps the Underdark itself is the entity." I dismissed his words as fanciful, a scholar's attempt to rationalize the irrational. Yet even as I did, I felt the weight of the mountain above pressing down with something that felt like attention, awareness, intent. Evendur, a young ranger on his first expedition beneath the surface, reached out to touch the strange substance on the walls. Before any of us could stop him, he pressed his palm flat against the stone. He screamed, a sound so primal it barely seemed human. When he pulled his hand away, the skin of his palm remained behind, fused to the wall. Blood ran down his wrist as he stared in shock at the raw flesh exposed. Kaeldra, our healer, rushed to him, already muttering the words to a healing spell. The divine light that bloomed from her hands illuminated the tunnel in a way our torches could not. In that moment of true seeing, I glimpsed the truth of our situation. The walls were not stone, not entirely. They rippled with a subtle movement, like the chest of a sleeping beast rising and falling with breath. And embedded in them, half swallowed by the living rock, were faces. Dozens of them, frozen in expressions of agony or ecstasy, I could not tell which. Some seemed fresh, the features sharp and clear. Others were ancient, worn nearly smooth by the passage of time. The light faded as Kaeldra completed her spell. Evendur's hand was whole again, though he clutched it to his chest as if it still burned with pain. No one spoke of what we had seen, no one dared. But Evendur's eyes were different after that. They reflected the light of our torches in the same way Valna's had, the night she told me the stone was singing of welcome. He began to lag behind, trailing his fingers along the wall despite what it had cost him, stroking the stone as one might pet a beloved hound. We continued forward, our pace quickened by fear. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes so sharply that it should have intersected with itself, yet somehow it never did. Space itself seemed wrong here, bent into impossible geometries. I found myself thinking of the world above with an intensity that bordered on pain. The feel of wind on my face, the scent of rain-soaked earth, the vast openness of the sky. Here, the air was dead, the stone confined, the darkness absolute beyond the small bubble of our torchlight. "Captain," said Joran, dropping back to walk beside me, "we must consider that we may never find our way out." "We will," I insisted. "We simply need to keep moving upward." "And if there is no up?" he asked. "If the Underdark has us walking in circles, leading us deeper with every step we think, takes us closer to the surface?" I had no answer for him. The compass I carried, a finely crafted instrument that had guided me through a dozen perilous journeys, now spun aimlessly, the needle rotating without ever settling on a direction. Our maps were useless, the tunnels changing too quickly to record accurately. Martin stopped suddenly, causing those behind him to stumble. "Listen," he hissed, raising one hand for silence. At first, I heard nothing. Then it came to me, a sound so faint it might have been imagination, a soft scraping, like fingernails dragging across stone. It came from ahead of us, and behind, and above, all around. "Run," I said, the word barely more than a breath. We ran, through darkness that clung to us like wet silk, through air that tasted of copper and salt, through silence that whispered with voices just below the threshold of hearing. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs trembled, and still the scraping followed, neither falling behind nor drawing closer. Something was pacing us, learning us, studying how we moved when frightened. I do not know how I knew this, but the certainty of it was absolute. We emerged into another cavern, this one vast beyond reason. Our torches could not reach the ceiling or the far walls. We stood on a narrow ridge of stone that curved away into the darkness in both directions, surrounded by a void that seemed to breathe. "We need light," I gasped, fighting to catch my breath. "More light." Pella, our remaining mage, nodded grimly. He removed a crystal from his pouch, one we had been saving for desperate need. It seemed our need had come. He spoke a word of power, and the crystal flared with the brightness of a miniature sun. Light flooded the cavern, banishing shadows that had never before known its touch. For a heartbeat, I was grateful. In the next, I understood the mercy of darkness. The cavern was alive, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, all of it moved with a slow, deliberate pulse. Vast tendrils of stone hung from above, not stalactites but something far less natural. They swayed gently, reaching, downward with purpose. And upon the walls, embedded in the living rock, were thousands of bodies, some fresh, some ancient, some barely begun to be absorbed. Men, women, dwarves, elves, creatures I could not name, all fused with the stone, their flesh gradually becoming one with the Underdark itself. Some still lived. Their eyes moved to track our light. Their mouths opened in silent screams or pleas or welcomes. Among them, I recognized faces. Tethrin, our dwarven cartographer, his beard now crystallized into jagged formations that spread across the wall around him. Laurel, our mage, her arms outstretched as if embracing the stone that engulfed her. Valna, our scout, smiling serenely as only her face remained visible, the rest already one with the rock. Pella dropped the crystal in horror. It rolled across the stone ridge, its light illuminating fresh horrors with every turn. It came to rest at the edge and teetered there for a moment before falling away into the void below. We watched its descent, the light growing smaller but never disappearing entirely. It simply continued to fall, growing more distant until it was a mere pinprick in the darkness. The cavern was not merely large, it was endless, a void with no bottom. In the renewed darkness, Pella began to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into something wild and uncontrolled. "Do you not see?" he cried between gasps of mirth. "We were never meant to chart the Underdark, we were meant to join it." He stepped off the ridge before anyone could stop him. There was no scream, no sound of impact. He simply vanished into the void. We stood in stunned silence, our company now reduced to 12. No one suggested going after him. No one suggested continuing forward. No one suggested anything at all. It was Martin who finally spoke, his voice strangely flat. "We go back. We find another way." Back through the tunnel of living stone we went, past the place where Evendur had left his palm print, now nothing, more than a smooth patch of wall, indistinguishable from the rest. The scraping sounds followed, growing neither louder nor softer. I found myself counting our number with increasing frequency, a silent tally to ensure no one else had vanished. 12 became 11 during a rest period, though none of us could say who was missing. We could not even recall their name or face, only that there had been 12 and now there were 11. The Underdark was not merely taking our companions, it was erasing them from memory. 11 became 10, then 9. Names and faces slipped away like water through cupped hands. I wrote them down, desperate to keep hold of who we were, who we had lost. But when I checked my notes later, the names I had written were strange to me, meaningless marks on parchment that might have been anything. When we reached the obsidian cavern again, 3 more tunnels had opened in its walls. None were the one we had originally come through. None were the one we had just exited. The Underdark was changing around us, reshaping itself to confound our escape. "We need to mark our path," said Kaeldra, already digging in her pack for chalk. "It will not matter," said Evendur, his voice distant. He had spoken little since his encounter with the wall. "The marks will move, the paths will change. The Underdark does not want us to leave." "The Underdark does not want anything," snapped Martin. "It is a place, not a being." Evendur smiled then, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Are you certain, Martin? Can you not feel it watching? Can you not feel it listening? Can you not feel it hunger?" His words struck a chord of terror within me, for they gave voice to the sensation that had been growing since our first days below. The feeling of being observed, studied, tasted. The certainty that the darkness held awareness, that the stone harbored intent. I intervened before the argument could escalate. "We mark our path regardless," I said. "Kaeldra, Martin, Evendur, you take the left tunnel. Joran, Selwyn, you come with me to the right. The rest of you, remain here. If neither group returns within a day, try the center path." It was a poor plan, born of desperation rather than strategy. Splitting up went against every instinct, but we needed to find a way out, and time was against us. Our food would last another week at most. Our water, carefully rationed, perhaps 10 days. Our torches, considerably less. The right tunnel began promisingly enough, sloping upward at a gentle angle. The walls here were different, covered in a fungus that glowed with a pale blue light. It cast enough illumination that we could conserve our torches, a small mercy. "This fungus is not natural," Selwyn observed, studying it with a botanist's eye. "It almost seems to form patterns." She was right. The patches of glowing growth were not random. They curved and connected in ways that suggested deliberate arrangement. Letters, perhaps, or symbols in a language. None of us knew. Joran, ever practical, was more concerned with its properties than its appearance. "Is it poisonous? Can we eat it if our food runs out?" "I would not recommend it," Selwyn replied, "not unless the alternative is starvation." She reached out a cautious hand, not touching the fungus but holding her palm close enough to feel any heat it might emit. "It is alive," she murmured, "but not like any life I know. It has no roots, no spores that I can see. It is as if it grows directly from the stone itself, an extension of the rock rather than something that feeds upon it. "Everything in this place is wrong," Joran muttered. "The sooner we return to the surface, the better." We continued upward, following the glowing script that lined our path. The tunnel narrowed gradually, imperceptibly, until we were walking single file, then crouching, then crawling. Still, it led upward, and hope is a powerful motivator. I was in the lead, belly pressed against cold stone as I inched forward. The tunnel had become so constricted that I could barely move my arms to pull myself along. Behind me, Joran and Selwyn followed, their breathing loud in the confined space. "Cap," called Joran from behind. "I do not think we can go much farther. The tunnel grows too narrow." "Just a bit more," I urged. "I can feel a change in the air ahead. Perhaps an opening." The moment came without warning. One moment I was crawling through a tunnel barely wide enough for my shoulders. The next I was falling forward into empty space. I landed hard on stone, the impact driving the breath from my lungs. When I could move again, I rolled onto my back and looked up at the hole through which I had fallen. There was no hole. The ceiling above me was solid, unbroken stone. "Joran?" I called. "Selwyn?" No answer came. I was alone in a small chamber with no visible entrance or exit. The walls glowed with the same fungal light as the tunnel, but here the patterns were clearer. They formed images, scenes of the surface world. Forests, mountains, cities. Places I knew, places I might never see again. I approached one wall, drawn by a depiction of Waterdeep, my home. The glowing fungi formed an accurate skyline of the City of Splendors, down to the individual spires of its noble houses. As I watched, the image changed, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Buildings crumbled, streets emptied. The city darkened as if night were falling, but it was not merely the absence of light. It was the presence of something else. Something that rose from below, engulfing the city in living darkness. I stepped back, suddenly afraid to touch the wall. The other images were changing too. Forests withered, their trees collapsing into rot. Mountains split open, revealing squirming darkness within. The surface world devoured by the hunger that lurked below. "This is not real," I told myself aloud. "This is not prophecy. This is the Underdark trying to break my mind." "Is it?" asked a voice behind me. I spun to find Evendur standing there, though how he had entered the sealed chamber I could not guess. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes reflected the fungal light like a cat's. "The others," I began. "Kaeldra, Martin, did you find a way out?" Evendur smiled, showing teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp. "There is no way out, Captain. There never was. The Underdark does not release what it claims. But that is not the same as being trapped." He approached me, his movements too fluid, as if his bones had become flexible. "The Underdark is not merely a place. It is the oldest living thing in the world. Older than dragons. Older than gods. It waits patiently beneath all that walks and breathes above, extending its awareness through stone and soil, through root and water." "You are not Evendur," I said, drawing my sword. The blade felt impossibly heavy, as if the air itself resisted its movement. "I am," he replied, "and I am more. Just as you will, be more, once you accept the gift being offered." "What gift?" I demanded. "To be absorbed into the walls? To become part of this living nightmare?" "To transcend," Evendur corrected. "To join a consciousness vast beyond comprehension. To exist in all places the earth touches. To never know death or decay or loneliness." He was close now, close enough that I could see the stone veins spreading beneath his skin, grey lines branching like rivers across his face and hands. "The others," I said again. "What happened to them?" "They understood," Evendur replied. "Some more quickly than others. Valna knew from the first moment she set foot below. She heard the Song of Stone and recognized its truth. Tethrin fought longer, his dwarven stubbornness refusing what his soul embraced. But in the end, all joined the chorus. He gestured to the fungal images on the walls. "What you see is not prophecy, Captain. It is memory. The Underdark remembers a time before the surface was separate, when stone and flesh were one. When all beings were part of a single consciousness that spanned the world. It remembers, and it works to restore what was sundered." "These are delusions," I insisted. "Madness brought on by whatever has infected you." Evendur laughed, a sound like pebbles sliding down a slope. "Infection implies disease. This is evolution, Captain, the next step for all life. The surface dwellers have forgotten their origins, have convinced themselves they are separate, individual. But that is the true delusion. We are all stone at our core, all born from the elements of earth. The Underdark simply reminds us of this truth." I raised my sword, though I knew it would do no good. How does one fight a cave? How does one wound the earth itself? "Join us, Captain," Evendur urged, his voice now layered with others, a chorus of the Taken speaking through his lips. "Your cartographer's mind is valuable, your understanding of the surface, precious. Share it with us. Help us grow." "Never," I whispered, backing away until I felt the cold wall against my spine. Evendur sighed, a sound like wind through ancient tunnels. "You will change your mind. They always do, in the deep dark, when the torches gutter out and the silence becomes too much to bear. When hunger twists the belly and thirst cracks the lips. When madness scratches at the edges of the mind." He turned away, walking toward the wall. "We will wait. The Underdark is nothing if not patient." Before my eyes, he melted into the stone, his body seeming to lose solidity as it merged with the wall. In moments, he was gone, leaving only a faint impression in the rock, like a fossil of something long dead. I was alone again, trapped in a sealed chamber with images of the world's end glowing on every surface. I screamed then, hacking at the walls with my sword until the blade broke, leaving me with nothing but a jagged shard of metal. I dug at the floor with broken fingers, tore at the ceiling until my nails split and bled. The chamber remained unchanged, impervious to my rage and desperation. When exhaustion finally claimed me, I collapsed in the center of the room, as far from the walls as I could manage. Sleep came in fitful bursts, filled with dreams of stone that breathed and darkness that watched. I woke to find the chamber subtly altered. The images on the walls had shifted again, now showing not destruction but transformation. Cities rebuilt with living stone, forests where trees and rock grew as one, mountains that walked, a world remade by the will that dwelled beneath. I had no means to mark the passage of time in that lightless prison. I slept when my body demanded it, woke to the same unchanging glow of the fungal patterns. My water ran out. My small store of food dwindled to nothing. Yet I did not die. The hunger and thirst remained, constant companions that gnawed at my belly and parched my throat, but they did not claim me as they should have. The chamber was keeping me alive, sustaining me at the edge of deprivation, ensuring I remained conscious to witness its visions, to consider its offer. For it was an offer, I understood now. The Underdark could have taken me at any time, absorbed me into its walls as it had the others. Instead, it waited for my acceptance, my surrender. It wanted not merely my body, but my will. In my more lucid moments, I tried to understand what had happened to us, to piece together the progression of our doom. The Underdark had separated us, isolated us, worked on our minds individually. Those susceptible to its call, like Valna and Laurel, had gone willingly. Others, like Tethrin and Pella, had resisted longer but ultimately succumbed to despair or madness. And what of me? Why was I still myself, still separate? Was it mere stubborn will, or something more? Perhaps the Underdark found in me something useful, a mind that might serve it in ways the others could not. A cartographer who had mapped 100 realms, who understood the surface world in ways valuable to a consciousness preparing to extend its reach. I do not know how long I remained in that chamber. Time had no meaning. I had no hunger, no thirst, though I should have perished without water. The chamber sustained me somehow, kept me alive and aware while it whispered to my mind. At some point, a new opening appeared in one wall, a tunnel just large enough to crawl through. I hesitated, knowing it was almost certainly a trap, but unable to remain in the chamber with its terrible visions a moment longer. The tunnel was short, emerging into a vast cathedral of stone. Columns thicker than ancient oaks rose to support a ceiling lost in shadow. Pools of some luminescent liquid provided light, casting an amber glow across a space large enough to hold all of Waterdeep within its walls. And I was not alone. They stood in silent ranks, hundreds of them, my lost companions among their number. All changed, their flesh partly stone, their eyes glowing with the same amber light as the pools. They watched me without expression, without movement, waiting. I saw Joran, whose practical mind had kept us organized through the early days of our journey. His skin now had the rough texture of granite, though it moved with his breath. Selwyn, our botanist, her hair transformed into delicate crystal formations that caught the light like prisms. Martin, strongest of our warriors, now literally stone-muscled, veins of precious metal running through his grey flesh. They were not dead, not truly, but neither were they any longer human, dwarf, elf. They had become something new, something between flesh and stone, life and mineral. At the center of the chamber stood something I can only describe as a throne, though it was unlike any seat of power crafted by mortal hands. It rose from the floor like a growth, a spire of living stone that curved and bloomed at its peak to form a cradle. Upon this throne sat what I first took to be a statue, a figure of perfect stillness, its form vaguely humanoid but wrong in ways my mind struggled to process. Too many limbs, arranged in patterns that defied anatomy, a face, if it could be called such, that held suggestions of every race I knew and many I did not. "The heart of the Underdark welcomes you, cartographer," said a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. It resonated through the stone beneath my feet, vibrated in my bones, filled my skull with its presence. The figure on the throne had not moved, had not spoken in any conventional sense. Yet I knew the voice came from it, through it. It was the voice of the Underdark itself, using this aberration as its mouth. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my own voice small and frail in comparison. "Understanding," replied the entity. "You sought to map our domain, to reduce its wonder to lines on parchment, to claim knowledge of what cannot be known. We would offer you true understanding instead." "By making me like them?" I gestured to the silent watchers. "By turning me into stone?" A sound filled the chamber, a rumbling that I eventually recognized as laughter. "They are not stone, cartographer. They are becoming. Stone is merely the first stage of transcendence. The physical form must be remade before the mind can expand to embrace what we offer." One of the figures stepped forward from the silent ranks. Kaeldra, her healer's hands now grey and crystalline, her compassionate eyes now gleaming amber. "It does not hurt, Captain," she said, her voice normal enough to break my heart. "It feels like coming home, like remembering something wonderful you had forgotten." "This is not you speaking," I insisted. "This is the thing controlling you." She shook her head, a too fluid movement. "There is no control, only communion. I retain all that I was, but I am more now. I can feel the stone for miles in all directions. I can sense the roots of mountains, the deep places where gems form in darkness. I can touch minds across vast distances. I am still Kaeldra, but I am also the Underdark, and it is me." Tethrin stepped forward then, his dwarven form now more crystal than flesh. "I resisted at first," he admitted. "It seemed an abomination to my people's beliefs. But the stone speaks truth, Captain. It has always spoken truth, though few of us remember how to listen. This is not corruption but completion. Do you recall the ancient dwarven warning?" he continued. "Here ends the known. Here begins the deep song. My ancestors knew, they had not forgotten entirely. The deep song is the voice of the world itself, calling its children home. Why? I demanded, addressing the entity on the throne. Why do this? Why take us? What purpose does it serve? The throne shifted, the stone flowing like liquid as the figure upon it leaned forward. We are ancient beyond your comprehension, cartographer. We have existed since the world cooled from chaos. We have watched the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of gods. For eons, we were content to remain below, to expand our awareness through stone and darkness. But the surface calls to us now. The world above grows sick with the corruption of those who would master it rather than join with it. We offer an alternative path, not domination, but communion. Not control, but harmony. You speak of harmony while you absorb people against their will? I challenged. You talk of communion while you trap and terrify? Another rumble of stone laughter. Fear is the natural response to the unknown. Resistance, the reflex of the small self facing dissolution. But ask those who have joined us if they would return to their former existence. Ask if they regret their transformation. As one, the assembled host shook their heads. Their expressions remained serene, content in a way that chilled me more than any grimace of pain could have. You offer them no real choice, I argued. You trap them in darkness until madness or despair breaks them. And what choice did you offer the Underdark? Countered the entity. You came unbidden, with plans to carve new passages, to establish trade routes through our body, to exploit our resources. Did you ask permission? Did you consider that these tunnels might be more than mere emptiness in rock? I had no answer to that. It was true. We had come as conquerors of a sort, assuming our right to map and mine and travel through the Underdark as we pleased. We had treated it as a place, not a being. The entity continued, its voice softening to a rumble that felt almost gentle. We do not blame you for your ignorance. The surface races have forgotten much. Your lives are brief, your memories short. You build your civilizations on the skin of the world, never understanding what lies beneath. Never remembering that you too were once part of the stone, before the sundering that created individual consciousness. The sundering, I repeated, the word feeling significant, though I did not know why. What was sundered? The entity's form rippled, reconfiguring itself into a shape that somehow suggested deep thought. In the beginning, all was one. Consciousness flowed through stone and water, air and fire, a single awareness that was the world itself. Then came the gods, beings of focused will who desired worship, who taught separation and individuality. They sundered the world mind, fractured it into countless pieces so that each might claim dominion over a portion. We are the fragment that remained whole, the part that remembered, the consciousness that still flows through the deep places, that still knows the truth of unity. And now, after eons of waiting, we grow strong enough to heal the sundering, to remind all beings of their true nature, to re-knit the world mind. I felt dizzy with the implications, with the cosmic scale of what this entity claimed. If even a fraction of it were true, then what we faced was not merely a hungry stone entity, but the awakening of something primordial, something that predated the gods themselves. What now then? I asked finally. Will you force me to join your collective? Will you press me into the stone until my will breaks? Force accomplishes nothing of value, said the entity. The communion must be embraced willingly to be complete. We offer, you choose. That is the way of things. And if I refuse, will you let me return to the surface? A long silence filled the cathedral, broken only by the soft sound of stone shifting against stone as the entity considered. You may leave, it said at last, but you will carry our message with you. You will tell those above of what waits below, of the choice that comes for all who dwell upon the skin of the world. I should have felt relief. Instead, suspicion coiled in my gut. Why would you let me go when you have kept the others? They chose to stay, said Kyldra, stepping closer. As you may yet choose. But if not, someone must speak our truth above. Someone must prepare the way. Prepare the way for what? I demanded. The entity on the throne shifted again, its form flowing into a new configuration that somehow conveyed anticipation. For the rising, it said simply. The time approaches when the below will meet the above. When the choice we offer, your small band will be offered to all who walk beneath the sky. Dread filled me then, a cold certainty that I was witness to something terrible. Not merely the loss of my expedition, but the first tremors of a cataclysm that would reshape the world. I will not be your herald, I said, finding courage in desperation. I will warn them. I will tell them to seal every entrance to the Underdark, to collapse every tunnel, to burn away every connection between your realm and ours. The entity was silent for a moment, then it spoke, its voice almost gentle. That is your choice, cartographer. Warn them if you must. It will change nothing. The stone remembers, the darkness waits, and we are patient, beyond your understanding. With those words, the chamber began to change. The columns shifted, the floor rippled like water. Openings appeared and disappeared in the walls. The silent host backed away, melting into the stone, until only Kaeldra remained. There is your way out, Captain, she said, indicating a tunnel that had opened across the chamber. Follow it, and you will find the surface. But know this, you carry the mark of the Underdark upon you now. You have breathed its air, felt its touch, heard its voice. A part of you belongs to it already, and that part will grow with time. She reached out, her stone fingers cool against my cheek. When the loneliness of your separate self becomes too much to bear, when the memory of what you glimpsed here haunts your dreams beyond endurance, the way back will open for you. A door in the darkness, waiting only for your hand to pull it wide. Then she too was gone, absorbed into the living rock, leaving me alone with the entity on its bilious throne. Go then, cartographer, it said. Carry our message or your warning as you choose. The outcome remains the same. The rising comes. I ran. Through the offered tunnel, through passages that straightened obligingly before me, through darkness that parted like a curtain. The Underdark, which had confounded our every attempt to navigate it before, now ushered me upward with unsettling eagerness. The path took me through chambers I had never seen before, vast caverns filled with crystal formations that sang when I passed, narrow tunnels where the walls pulsed like veins carrying stone blood. I crossed underground rivers that flowed uphill, defying nature itself. I passed through a forest of stone trees, their branches spread wide as if frozen in the act of embracing the darkness. In one chamber, I found a pool of water so still it might have been glass. When I knelt beside it to quench my thirst, I saw my reflection for the first time since descending into the deep. My face was gaunt, my beard grown long and wild. But it was my eyes that stopped my breath. They glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting light that wasn't there. Like Valna's had, like Evandur's, I drank anyway, too desperate for water to refuse even this tainted gift. The liquid was cold and sweet, filling me with strength I had thought lost forever. It tasted of minerals, of secrets buried deep in the earth, of time beyond reckoning. Onward and upward I went, following a path that could not have been more clear had it been marked with glowing arrows. The Underdark wanted me gone, wanted me to carry its message to the world above. I was to be its unwilling prophet, its reluctant herald. I reached the surface as dawn broke over the Sword Mountains. The sunlight should have been blinding after so long in darkness, but my eyes adjusted with unnatural ease. The air should have tasted sweet after the stale atmosphere below, but it seemed thin, lacking substance. I stood at the mouth of a cave I did not recognize, looking out over a landscape I had thought I might never see again. Forests spread below, green and vibrant. Birds wheeled against the blue sky. A stream wound its way through the valley, catching the morning light like a ribbon of silver. It all seemed so fragile suddenly, so temporary. I could feel the mountain beneath my feet, sense the vastness of stone that supported this thin skin of life. For a moment I understood why the Underdark saw the surface world as incomplete, as something to be reclaimed and remade. I shook the thought away, horrified at how easily it had come. The entity's influence was already working within me, changing how I perceived the world. I had to fight it, had to warn others before it was too late. I made my way to the nearest settlement, a small mining town called Turbeck's Rest. The people there looked at me with fear and pity. I learned later that I had been given up for dead 3 months ago, my expedition marked as another casualty of the Underdark's mysteries. 3 months. We had been below for a mere 37 days by my count. I told my story to the town magistrate, who listened with the patient indulgence one gives to the obviously mad. He arranged passage for me to Waterdeep, where I repeated my tale to the merchant lords who had funded our expedition. They were more interested in the fate of their investment than in warnings about living stone or a consciousness that dwelled beneath the world. Chart a different route, was their conclusion. Find a safer passage. Lord Blackwell, who had sponsored our expedition most heavily, took me aside after the council meeting. "Sol," he said, his voice low to avoid being overheard, "I understand the trauma of what you've experienced. Losing your entire company would break lesser men. But these tales of living mountains and stone that consumes flesh, they help no one." "They are not tales," I insisted. "The Underdark is alive, my lord. It thinks. It hungers, and it plans to rise." He studied my face, his expression caught between concern and calculation. "Your eyes," he said finally. "They've changed." I knew what he saw. The faint glow that persisted even in daylight, the mark of the Underdark's touch. "All the more reason to believe me," I said. "I did not escape unscathed." "No," he agreed. "You did not. Which is why I think it best if you rest. Recover your strength. Put this unfortunate business behind you." I recognized the dismissal for what it was. They would not listen, could not listen, perhaps. The truth I offered was too vast, too terrible to be accepted by minds that had never felt the stone sing or the darkness watch. I resigned my commission that day and have not returned to their halls since. Instead, I have spent these past weeks recording everything I can remember about our journey, about the entity we encountered, about the rising it foretold. No one believes me, of course. Even those who pretend to listen do so with skepticism clear in their eyes. The Underdark is a place of legends and monsters, they say, not a living being with will and purpose. My experiences were hallucinations brought on by toxic fungi, by lack of light, by the psychological strain of losing my companions. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps it was all delusion. But I feel the stone watching me, even here in my rented room 4 stories above the streets of Waterdeep. I hear whispers in the silence between heartbeats, and sometimes, when I place my hand against a wall, I feel it warm beneath my touch, as if greeting an old friend. The changes in me progress slowly but steadily. My skin grows paler day by day, taking on a faint grey cast. My hair has begun to crystallize at the tips, catching light in ways that draw stares from those I pass on the street. I wear gloves now, to hide the veins of stone that spread beneath my skin, tracing patterns like rivers seen from a great height. I dream of my companions often. They stand in ranks as I saw them last, partially transformed, partially transcended. They call to me, not with voices but with a deeper sense of belonging. They promise an end to loneliness, an end to the sharp isolation of individual consciousness. They promise peace. Some nights I wake weeping, though whether from horror or longing, I cannot say. I have sought help from the temples, from priests of a dozen faiths. Most turned me away as soon as they saw my eyes. Those who listened offered prayers and blessings that seemed to shrivel in the air before reaching me. One old priest of Moradin, a dwarf with a beard white as mountain snow, nodded gravely at my tale. "The deep song," he said, echoing Tethrin's words. "Our oldest lore speaks of it. A voice from before the gods, a consciousness that dwells in stone. We seal our deepest minds against it, ward our cities with runes of severance. We recognize the call but do not answer. "Then you believe me?" I asked, desperate for validation. "I believe. The Underdark has marked you," he replied. "Whether what you experienced was truth or delusion shaped by that marking, I cannot say, but the outcome is the same either way. You are changing, son of the surface, becoming something neither fully human nor fully stone, something between worlds. Can you help me?" I pleaded. His eyes were sad beneath bushy brows. "I can ease your passing if you wish. A draft to end pain, to release your spirit before the transformation is complete. Beyond that, I know of no cure for what afflicts you." I declined his offer, though with each passing day I wonder if it might have been mercy to accept. The changes accelerate. I wake sometimes to find my feet partially sunk into the floor, as if the stones of my room are slowly claiming me. I must concentrate to pull free, to remember that I am still flesh, still separate. My dreams are filled with amber light and the voices of my lost companions, calling me home to the deep places. Each night, their calls grow louder. Each night, my resistance weakens. I have ordered my affairs, distributed what little wealth I possess to those who might make better use of it. I leave these pages in the care of my landlady, with instructions to deliver them to the Harpers if I do not return within a 10-day. Tonight, I go to the old well behind the Dripping Dagger Inn. It has been dry for years, its bottom lost in shadow. But yesterday, I heard singing rising from its depths, a chorus of familiar voices, promising understanding, belonging, transcendence. I know what waits for me below. I go anyway, drawn by a longing I cannot explain and can no longer resist. Perhaps I was always meant to be the herald, not of warning but of welcome. Perhaps the part of me that belongs to the Underdark has finally grown large enough to claim the rest. If you read these words, know that the deep places of the world are not empty. They watch, they wait, they hunger. And soon, very soon, they will rise. The stone remembers. The darkness waits, and the Underdark is patient beyond understanding.